We now move to ongoing world trade tensions, where in a major escalation of the US-China trade standoff, the US President of the United States, Donald Trump, has announced he will unveil new tariff rates imposed on semiconductors within the next week. Let's listen in.
That's right, but the tariffs will be in place in the not distant future because, as you know, like we did with steel, like we did with automobiles, like we did with aluminum, which are now fully on, we'll be doing that with semiconductors, with chips, and numerous other things. And that'll take place in the very near future. And it'll happen very fast. It'll all happen very fast.
Do you know what rate the semiconductor tariff?
I'm going to be announcing it over the next week.
Speaking aboard Air Force One, Trump made it clear that no country will be getting off the hook on tariffs, signaling a tougher stance ahead. This comes as China retaliates by halting exports of key rare earth minerals and magnets, which are very critical to the global electronics, auto and defense industries. These materials, now subject to tight export controls, could choke supply chains for American tech and military firms. Trump says the US has a $1 trillion trade deficit with China, accusing Beijing of taking hundreds of billions a year and warning that there will be no deal unless the surplus is resolved. Let's take a look at what he said.
But with China, it's $1 trillion, and we have to solve our trade deficit with China. We have $1 trillion trade deficit with China. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year we lose with China, and unless we solve that problem, I'm not going to make a deal. Now, I'm willing to deal with China, but they have to solve their surplus. We have a tremendous deficit problem with China. They have a surplus of at least $1 trillion a year. I think it's like $1.1 trillion.
Meanwhile, China has slammed the US for what it calls tariff bullying. A top customs official says Washington's reciprocal tariffs violate World Trade Organization rules and threaten the global economic order. Listen in.
美国以各种借口宣布对包括中国在内的所有贸易伙伴滥施关税。前面讲了，这不可避免地对全球包括中美在内的贸易造成负面影响。美方所谓对等关税，颠覆现有国际经济秩序，将美国利益凌驾于国际社会公利之上，是典型的关税霸凌行为，严重违反世界贸易组织规则，严重损害以规则为基础的多边贸易。
In Europe, Trump struck a similar tone, saying the EU has taken a lot of our wealth and must pay up, not just going forward, but for the past trade imbalances too. Listen in to what he said on China and Europe.
Europe's treated us very badly. We put a big tariff on Europe. They are coming to the table. They want to talk, but there's no talk unless they pay us a lot of money on a yearly basis. Number one for present, but also for past, because they've taken a lot of our wealth away, and we're not going to allow it to happen.
We are joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao, fellow at the Hudson Institute, located in Tokyo, Japan. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us. Dr. Nagao, Donald Trump says that China has a $1 trillion trade deficit with the United States. Is that a correct statement?
Yes and no, but because how to calculate, it relies on how to calculate in this case. But at the same time, this is correct or not is not so important because this is intimidation type diplomatic negotiation. So when Trump said something radical thing as intimidation, indeed, fact or not is not matter. In the past, we can remember what happened in the negotiation between the U.S. and Ukraine. President Trump said Zelensky is a dictator, but next day the media asked him, is he the dictator? But his response is, I thought I did not say like that. So that's why when the intimidation has happened, the content is not so important. Just intimidation is the tool of the negotiation.
Yes. Dr. Nagao, yesterday, the day before, China, the US exempted tariffs from mobile phones and other electronics. This was kind of seen by some as a sort of olive branch slightly to China. But now Donald Trump has come back and say he wants to impose tariffs on these semiconductor chips. What significance does this have to China's industries?
Economy is very complex, especially under the global free trade. So that's why which parts came from which country. The most cases we talk about China, and the rare earths, 90% of the share of the rare earths came from China. These facts indicate that when we produce something, something is related with China. So that's why how to deal with China's dominance, how to deal with US-China trade war. In this case, once President Trump imposed a high tariff to Chinese products, but after that they realized some part of the product is affect the U.S. economy, and which side will get more benefit is a little bit controversial.
Yes.
That's why adjusting the situation is needed. But in case of the Trump administration tried to do something very strong to negotiate with other countries. So that's why they impose tariff first. After that, they try to adjust the situation. So that is a process. So this is not meaning that Trump is the policy is not unplanned, because when we check the process in the four administration in the past, the end of the Obama and the Trump first time and Biden and the Trump second time, every time they try to decouple with China. So that's why this is in process. So when Trump started, everyone surprised, but at the same time, the course they were working with the same.
Yes. Dr. Nagao, moving on, China has just announced that it's going to stop selling these certain rare earth minerals that people need for batteries, people need for wind turbines. There's some elements of the defense ministry that it's needed in. How big of a problem are these the lack of these rare earth minerals going to be for the United States?
This is a big problem because now we can find many sources of the rare earth, but not developed well. So this mine demands 7 to 10 years to develop to be the main part of the supply chain. So that's why the US government has already committed to find the alternative source, but at the same time, this alternative source is not enough level to continue the same level of the production. So that's why when the US need to deal with China's dominance, of course they impose a high tariff or they try to decouple with China. But viewed from the practical matters, indeed this is nearly impossible just now. So this is one kind of intimidation for the long-term process. President Trump tried to raise the tariff, but postpone and impose the tariff again, because even if this is not a practical level of the tariff, every time impose means that the company owners realize this is dangerous and risky.
Yes.
So that's why they will change attitude, and the decoupling process is indeed advancing step by step.
Dr. Nagao, I just want to touch on something very, very quickly because we're running out of time. But obviously, President Xi Jinping has landed in Vietnam for his tour of Southeast Asia. He will also visit Vietnam and Cambodia. These are the two places that have some of the highest reciprocal tariffs once this 90-day period of pause is over. What's the significance of this visit from Xi Jinping in Southeast Asia and the need for strengthening bilateral relations and economic relations between China and Southeast Asian countries?
Yeah, this visit is interesting. In case of the Malaysia, in case of the Cambodia, yes, it is understandable because their policy is relatively pro-China. But at the same time, in case of the Vietnam, this is interesting. Indeed, because of Vietnam fought with China for a long time in the many conflicts, so that's why indeed Chinese company try to relocate a factory from China to Vietnam to avoid US-China trade war. So that's why in case of Vietnam faced something controversial place just now. View from the security, Vietnam is of course friendly with the country around China who face China's threat. But at the same time, economy, of course, Vietnam is alternative source for the country around China. But at the same time, for Chinese company, Vietnam is also beneficial. So that's why under the current leadership, Vietnam try to choose a balancing policy, and that's why Xi Jinping try to visit Vietnam to crack the relation between U.S. and Vietnam. So that's why the country around China, including Japan, of course India, the role is important to make the Vietnam our side. So that is, I think, important, I believe.
Dr. Nagao, thank you very much for joining us. We now move over to the Indo-Pacific.